So good afternoon, everybody. I will start by letting everybody know that this session today will be recorded, and I'll mention in a moment what happens to that recording. But first of all, I would like, on behalf of the panel, to acknowledge the traditional Aboriginal owners of country throughout Victoria, and I pay our respects to them, to their culture, and to their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I particularly extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. All right, so welcome everybody. Welcome to Canaries in the Coal Mine 2021. And this is our first time online, so we're quite excited to do that. I'm just giving an eye on the people, the participants today. We're up to 183 participants, so it's great to have you all on board. Thank you everybody for making the time. I hope that you will find that we have something interesting to tell you and that you will go away better informed about us and about the subject matter today. I'll also let you know that we have a Q&A function in this webinar. You've probably come across this before, and this enables you to interact with the panel. So if you pop your questions into the Q&A function, we will try to answer them during the session, time permitting, of course. But also to let you know that we will be sending out a link to the recording together with our slides. And if there's any questions that we haven't got to, we will also answer them when we send out a link to the recording. Okay, everybody, so I will introduce the team who is your panel today. So I'm Maggie McNamara. I'm the manager of the team that looks after the board's trust account function. I'm a lawyer and I've been with the board for 13 years. I introduced my colleague, Christine Bell. She's a trust account analyst, so she has an accountancy background, and she's been working for the board for 24 years. So by comparison, I'm just a baby. And then we have Shalene, who is our trust advisor, and Shalene's been with the board for nearly 16 years. And you will find that most of you external examiners, when you contact the board, it will normally be Shalene who is your first point of contact. And I'm very confident that Shalene is able to solve all your problems, or at least your trust accounting problems anyway. So we've called today's presentation Canaries in the Coal Mine, and this is for a reason. The Canaries in the Coal Mine is a metaphor to do with the people going down the mines when they worked on the coal mines and so forth. And because of the noxious fumes in the mines, they would take a canary with them, and the unfortunate canary was the one who, if there was any noxious fumes, would die first. So the canaries were an advanced warning of danger. So how does that relate to you? Well, we're not sending you into any mines, we're not exposing you to noxious fumes, but you are at the board's early warning indicator. You can provide us with early signs of indicators of trouble, regulatory breaches, and within, looking at the law practices that you go and see in the barrister's clerk. So essentially, you are our eyes and our ears. So just moving to the next slide. Thank you. So where do you fit into the regulatory picture? So the regulatory picture is a jigsaw, and you are one of the pieces of the puzzle. We really are delighted to be able to connect with you in this forum. Because your role is an integral and important part of the regulation of Victorian law firms and barristers' clerks. So as you all well know, law practices and barristers' clerks must have their trust records examined every year, and that's examined by you as the external examiner. And in most cases, you will be the only representative of the board who go and see that law practice. Now, the board will attend the law practice from time to time to check the trust records, and they may be for different reasons. So the reasons may be because a client has complained. There may be something in the media that indicates that there is a problem. Perhaps another lawyer has complained or reported a problem with that law firm. In those cases, a trust investigator from my team will investigate the concerns, perhaps by visiting. Sometimes that isn't always necessary. Other investigatory techniques might be used by other qualified investigators, but of course that by no means covers the 2,100 law practices with trust accounts. Those 2,100 law practices, however, are visited by the external examiners every single year. So as I say, it's important, it's a very important connection between the law practices and the board, which means it's important that we hear from you when there are problems. And that can take two forms, really. So the problems can be with the trust records, which is, of course, where your expertise lies. But it's also with certain red flag problems, which is a term we're using. And Christine will explain what the red flag items mean. So how do you work? What is your work with the board? Essentially, your work together with the board is to help protect consumers of legal services. And it also supports the legal profession. You are a key investigatory link between the law firms and us, the board. You are there to educate the lawyers about the rules and to help them comply. And you are also there to advise the board about any problems with the record keeping so that the board can decide what action to take. So just on the next slide, thank you. So here are a list of, this is the board strategy that we've been working towards. And while you have a bit of a look at the how we're trying to do our work, I thought I'd give you an example of a recent case that happened. Well, what happens when you give us your reports? So as you know, you do your reporting through LSB Online, and it being an automated system or an IT system, it means that we can see easily and clearly when a rule has been breached. Therefore, we have a look at all those where you have identified a rule has been breached. We look at them and we see if they are serious issues. And then we consider what else do we know about the law practice? And we have a lot of other information about the law practice, obviously, that you would not know about. For instance, current complaints. Are there complaints that the clients have brought to our attention? Sometimes we get reporting from the lawyer directly, sometimes from a member of staff. We also know about the lawyer's disciplinary history, so we will take that into account as well. We will look at other compliance factors, including the SDA obligations, which Shalene is going to give you a demonstration of in a few moments. We also look at how you have reported in the past about these law practices. So have there been other deficiencies or other irregularities that you've reported to us? We will also look at their practice history. Who is within the practice and what do we know about them? And then the red flag items that I mentioned before that Christine will expand on. So we get your report, we look at whether the matters are serious, we have a look at the other things that we do know about the law practice, and then if we need to, we will engage with that law practice. So that could be by telephone, by email, we may visit them, we may ask for documents or other information, and then we see what happens. And the outcomes can be quite varied. So the best outcome is that everything is resolved. Or it could be a more serious problem that needs to be referred to the disciplinary team. We may consider putting a condition on their practicing certificate. We might recommend education. We might recommend that they engage a bookkeeper. Or in one of the most serious case, we may remove the trust authorization from that law practice completely. So whatever action we take, the information that you give us starts that particular ball rolling. But it also, we keep that information within our systems for our data analysis focus, because you can see that we are an evidence-based regulator. So this is the evidence that we gather so that we can do our work. So I'll just give you a short example, which is a regional lawyer who came to our attention when one of the external examiners reported at the reporting time about excessive delays in finalising an estate and paying stamp duty. So these would have appeared to that examiner as dormant balances. So we did what I just mentioned. We had a look at what else we knew about that lawyer, and we could see in his case that there were complaints coming into our office about delays. So we engaged with that lawyer and we discovered a practice where the lawyer was really not coping. He was coming to the end of his working life and really was ready for retirement. He was slowing down, so he wasn't able to keep up with his legal work. And he was relying on others within his office who were also not coping. So nobody in the office could really resolve the problems which the examiner had found. So in that case, the law practice was counselled, and eventually we assisted them to wind up the practice. So that was a good example of helping the profession, and the role of the external examiner in that scenario was absolutely vital. Okay, we just had a short glimpse of Christine, and she will be taking over for the next slide. Thanks, Christine. So just unmute yourself, Christine.
Hello, can you hear me, everyone? Good afternoon, lovely to have you here. I'm going to speak to you about the risk-based approach that we take within our organisation. Some of the slides that I am going to speak of now and later on down the track, there is a lot of detail on them, and we will be sending out some notes, so don't panic about writing everything down that's said. So as Maggie said, we're a risk-based regulator, and so what that means is that we need to focus on the more serious breaches. We can't get out to every practice, as you can imagine, and as Maggie said, so you're our eyes and ears when you're preparing your reports and you're actually out with or liaising with the practice. So as Maggie said, all of our reports go through LSB Online. So any reports that I receive with no breaches or comments automatically go straight through our systems, and that they clear the law practice, that they've satisfied all the requirements in regard to their trust applications for that year. All the remaining reports are held up for my review when you identify a breach or put a note in the final comments section on the report. At approximately, that means about 700 reports a year that get held up out of the 2,100 that Maggie spoke of before. When the reports come in that I do review, I then categorise them into higher breaches or lower breaches. So it's really essential that you document all breaches regardless of how small they are. So some examples of these ones, and I've got a few examples, but again, they are still breaches, but they're ones of a lower risk. So if we've got delays with reconciliations during the January break or school holidays, we tend to find law practices as well as ourselves tend to have breaks around then, and offices are shut. If the rest of the year is fine, then concerns in January don't tend to be that much of a risk. Bookkeepers not attending the office on a regular basis. Now, this raises its head really in country practices, not as much in the city, where a bookkeeper may only end up going to a practice once a month to write up the books on one day. This can be a positive from our experience that they do actually have a bookkeeper on hand to help them prepare their work. Minor balances, those under $20 which can't be sent to unclaimed monies, we do have a process around those. So things like, which I call minor technical breaches, where we have, say, the all bearer on checks. So the examiners would be aware of that breach. Registers where we don't have any transactions. So you may have a financial interest register with no transactions. So we've got two various views on that as to whether you should actually have a register with nothing on it, or basically no register. So registers with no addresses. Now, we know that there is actually a problem with LEAP, that some law practices are having that their registers do not appear with addresses on it. So, and we are going to address that problem with LEAP and some computerised accounting system problems. So can I go to the next slide, please? So I'm going to continue on the theme of the risk-based approach and talk about the concerns that we've had over the last 12 months about COVID-19. So as we all know, COVID's been quite challenging for all society, including our law practices, barristers, clerk, and external examiners. We've had many inquiries to our office about how to manage the trust accounts and from law practices how to manage their clients during the stage 4 lockdown and continuing on going forward. So these issues have included access into records into the office, computerised accounting systems not connected to the cloud, access for bookkeepers to maintain and records. So we had law practices that effectively were working from private premises, bookkeepers that actually couldn't leave their premises to go and actually prepare the books. So we understand that as a result, the trust records weren't up to date for a lot of practices. So what we did was late last year, we extended the deadline to complete all records, including the December reconciliations, until mid to late January. So I think that has brought, given the opportunity to allow people up to date. We had a little bit of a lockdown again, which may have a little bit of a delay again. But what that means from your perspective is that you're not required to notify us of any breaches of delays in reporting and recording during that period. However, you still need to notify us of the deficiencies, irregularities that clause still does remain. So on your examiner's report, there is no need to put that down as a breach. Again, if there are periods of, so reconciliations not done for the whole year, then that can be raised, absolutely. But if you believe that in January that they made a conscious effort to get the records up to date, then that should be fine. So in regard to the upcoming trust period, which we have had a lot of inquiries from you, we would prefer that you attend out of the practice, but many reasons may prevent this. As we know, the government restrictions can change very quickly. So that is basically the number one rule. We have to be mindful of that. So any health issues relating to practitioners, if they have any concerns with you coming, then take that into considerations. Any health issues for yourself, and what basically your accounting firm's protocols are ongoing out at this point in time. But if you need to complete the report online, it's still as you would if you were doing a physical visit. So that's all in regard to COVID-19. So I'm going to pass you over to Shalene now, who's going to speak about the overview of the Sca module.
Thanks, Christine. Welcome, everyone. So I'm just going to run through the calculation of the quarterly SDA calculation. Bear in mind, it's no need for the external examiners to cross-check this or anything like that. We automatically produce the calculation and send out the notification to the law practice and approved barristers clerks. So basically the calculation, it looks at the lowest balance of the trust account for the quarter, adds that to the balance of the statutory deposit account on the last day of the quarter. So sums those two up, and then it works out 70% of that amount. And then it looks at the difference to what's currently sitting in the statutory deposit account and what the 70% amount is. And that's what calculates the required statutory deposit account deposit. So just bear in mind, you will be sent out annual statutory deposit account statements, which is enough verification of the balance sitting in the statutory deposit account as at the 31st of March. You don't need to cross-check the Commonwealth Bank statement. The statement that you download through LSB Online is sufficient enough information. Next slide, please. So if at any point in time a law practice or approved barrister's clerk are unable to make the required deposit, we have now developed a great system through LSB Online where they can apply for an exemption from meeting that required deposit. And the result of the decision is automatically sent through to the law practice once they go through the required put in the bank statement, any unpresented checks and any pending payments, and they can see if they're able to meet an adjusted balance or not, which they can answer yes or no to. There is still ones that can still come through to us for further decision making, but majority of them are automatically, the decision is made through the LSB online portal. Just to let you know that the due dates for the end of trust year examination forms, so the Part A and the Part B, which are submitted by either the law practice or the approved barrister's clerk, are to be submitted by the 30th of April this year, and the external examiner's report to be submitted by 31st of May this year. And I will now pass you back to Christine to go on about the external examiner checklist.
Thanks, Shalene. So I said I'm going to speak the next few slides about more technical issues. So this one I'm going to speak about the external examiner's checklist. Now that slide is quite small for you to read, so I'm not going to go into that detail. It's just an example. But you may have been familiar, this concept was discussed at the external examiner's training course, and basically we worked with New South Wales to develop this checklist to assist external examiners for when they go out to law practices, that they can do some testing and what to test in relation to each rule. So the checklist gives an easy reference to the bookkeeping practices and linking back to their rules. And the tests actually require, there's very simple, a yes, no, or a not applicable response. And a no response may indicate a breach, which needs to be recorded in the Schedule 1 of where the breaches are. So the breaches, as I said before, however minor, need to be recorded and reported to us. So the examiner is required to conduct appropriate examination using the relevant sampling techniques, observation and inquiries to form your opinion as to whether the records have been maintained in accordance with the legislation. So the checklist isn't mandatory, and I know that some accounting firms have their own internal processes, and that is fine to be used, just as long as you can maintain the records if they were to be reviewed at a later date. And we're actually going through the checklist at the moment, and the most latest version should be up early next week for your use. So can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to speak to you now about things to watch out for when you are preparing your report. So this is the report is your opportunity to raise areas of concern with a practice or clerk that you want me to know about. So we've had a few little changes, cosmetic changes to the form this year, but they're not going to affect the way that you would report. So the enhancements that we have made, so we're on a working group with representatives from the Legal Services Council, New South Wales and soon WA, and Shalene's also a member of this group. So we have a look at what works, what doesn't work. So your feedback from your previous reports that you've put in, where you can have the opportunity to put some feedback, we absolutely read that every year and take that into consideration of what's working and what's not working. So when you're putting your reports together, as I've spoken about things not to be worried about as much, these are the things that if you can keep an eye out for. So as I've said before, reconciliation's not done. Now, reconciliations are the most important item that we look at. So when you're putting it together, how many months? Is it 1 month, as I said before, in January? Or is it 12 months? And last year I had a few come through where 15 months of reconciliations were done on the same day that the examiner came or the day before the examiner got there. So similar like on the slide, 5 out of 12 months, 1 out of 12 months, that would give me a scope of to be able to determine whether it's on the lower side or the higher side. The normal reconciliation type items that you would have: unpresented checks, adjustments on reconciliations, unknown amounts where they've stayed on the bank reconciliation for a long time, and dormant balances. So, you know, we've spent the last few years actually taking a large focus on dormant balances on reconciliations. Considerable work has been done by our office, and we actually have cleaned up a lot of old balances that were actually due back to the client. And again, this is client money. So we've encouraged the law practice to, you know, get it move on with these matters and resolve these matters. I've got one dormant balance on a law practice at the moment, which is back to 1993, which is even prior to when I started at the board. So making sure that money, if it's due to go to unclaimed monies, that it's sent to unclaimed monies. When you're looking at deficiencies, we get a lot of letters that say that deficiencies aren't a breach because they were an admin error. Well, that's not the case. Even though it is a mistake, it needs to be reported to our office. But if it has a clear and reasonable explanation, then that is fine. One of the problems that we did make a change to the form for this year was that we had a lot where the external examiner said that the law practice had notified our office of the deficiency or irregularity, but we had no record of it. So on your form this year, when you're submitting it, you'll notice there's a new column that says reference number. So that's our reference number that the law practice or clerk should be able to provide to you that they have notified us of the irregularity. Another issue we find is statements not being sent out to clients at the 30th of June. It'd be surprising how many law practices actually don't do that. It's the check that the client has, that the law practice still has their money on hand and what they think they have on hand. I think it tends to get lost a little bit because the trust year end date being 31st of March, I June isn't something that they would normally do in regard to accounting. So, but that's another one. Ledger accounts in the name of the law practice. We don't see as many of those now, but make sure the transactions relate to the last month and it's not a place where money can just sit there that hasn't been billed yet. And again, as I said before, if I remind you that all breaches need to be notified. So the question is basically, are there any breaches? So if when you get to that and you have got breaches, can you please select yes, and it will allow you to itemise the breaches. If you say no and put them in the final comments, then we lose track of what actually was a breach because as we were saying before, that we do evidence-based. So our evidence is that when we run the report, it says there was no breaches for that law practice. So I encourage you to try and, if you have breaches, put them, itemise them in that Schedule 1 where it asks you to have them. So can I have the next slide, please? This is a slide of things I'm going to talk about. Were a bit odd things. So last slide I've told you about issues that I'd like you to focus on, and similar to some of the ones that I explained before, some of the things that are of a lower risk, and I did raise some of those before. So can I have the next slide, please? So again, we're going to hand out these notes, so don't worry about writing down, but sending through the reasonable assurance management report, we don't need a copy of that. So the external examiner's report does not have an option for you to attach an attachment, and that is because we want you to put the all the information that you have about that law practice in that report. So there's no need for the reports. As Shalene mentioned, you don't need to calculate or confirm the statutory deposit account balance or any transactions throughout the year, as we can have all those records. Any change of law practice, address details, contact details need to be logged through our website. So if you can encourage the law practice or clerk to go back through our website now, we have a new facility on the law inquiry form where they can do that through there. So if you have a report that has no breaches on it at all, and in the final comment it has that the practitioner has changed his mobile, that will cause a delay because that was one of the reasons why it's being held up. So I encourage you to get the lawyer, feed the lawyer back that way through the law inquiry form. Citing of the practitioner's practicing certificates. So that's not something that you necessarily have to do. All our practitioners who hold a trust account are recorded in our system, and we have a very tight rein over who has and hasn't got practicing certificates with trust. So that's something that you don't necessarily need to focus your attention on. Just to clarify a couple of very quick rules. The use of BPay is one that's come up in the last few years, which is on our External Examiners Working Group agenda to look at, where the rule says that you must have, in a payment, you must have a BSB and account number, or for BPay, you don't have that. So we have a lot of examiners going into quite detail about breaching on that rule. We're well aware of that. If the law practice has got the BPay number, payer number and reference number in there, that is quite sufficient for our records. About checks being crossed. So we get a number of reports come through that says that checks weren't crossed in the checkbook. Not that we're using checks as much now these days, but the rule actually says that checks need to be marked negotiable at the time of drawing. So they don't actually have to have the whole checkbook crossed out while it's sitting in the drawer. So however, it is good accounting practice to do so. And the last one in regard to this is the rules for writing out receipts only starts when the owner of the money is known. So in some cases we will have, and I know barristers, clerks have this issue, and some lawyers, is where a client will just put money in the trust account with no description at all. They have absolutely no idea. So they can't actually write out a receipt if they don't know who the money actually belongs to. So the receipt rule really only starts when the owner of the money is known. So just to clarify, a last couple of things in regard to the examiner's reports that some people have come unstuck the last couple of years. So when the law practice completes the Part A, their confirmation part, it says whether they have control money, transit money, investment money. So depending on their options as to whether they tick yes or no, actually opens up the next part of Part B in the statement of trust money for them to complete that, which then subsequently opens up in the external examiner's report. So if you get to the external examiner's report and there is you can't actually put an opinion in, it's because there's a mistake in the Part A. So we need to get then the report restarted and the law practice rekey the information in again. Can I have the next slide, please? I'm going to talk to you about, Maggie mentioned about the red flags that we have. As you know, life throws us many challenges and lawyers aren't immune from these as well. Sometimes you might identify issues that are not necessarily related to the trust account, but can be affecting how the practice is actually running. And so by going out to the practice, as I mentioned before, is a good indication of that you actually can see what's going on. So some that don't necessarily relate to the trust accounting work, but issues that we have had raised are ill health. So external examiners aren't doctors, so we don't expect you to put a medical opinion on a practitioner. Sometimes the practitioner will tell you that there has been a delay because they have been in sick or in hospital. People with substance abuse or gambling problems, very messy offices, or those where private file information is just left everywhere. So I have had a few over the years examiners contact me and say that they've got in there and they can't even get to the accounting records, or their accounting records are just sort of pushed in the corner and they can't get through there because there's just boxes of files everywhere. Firms with a high turnover of staff, which, as we know from an accounting perspective, is not good. And people can get distracted from life pressures, divorce, and illness. As an auditor, you would be aware of the concerns when your client delays and cancels appointments, and that's the same for external examinations. So if you have your external law practice or barrister's clerk that is putting you off, and it could be one of those reasons above, or it could be another issue, don't hesitate to contact us if you are having trouble getting through to law practice and making an appointment. And again, just to finalise, in all circumstances, at any time throughout the year, don't think just because it's the trust year end that it's the time for you to notify us. You can notify us at any time throughout the year. I know examiners have great contacts with their law practice, their clients, and so anytime throughout the year, don't hesitate to contact us. So the Law Institute have a program that has been established that they can assist law practices, and Maggie's going to explain that to you now. And so Maggie, for you, please.
Sorry about that. Before I go on to explain those things, we have a few questions and I think it might be worthwhile just answering them. Christine, would you mind coming back onto the screen, please? And unmuting yourself, thanks. So there are a couple of questions. I don't know whether you're looking in the Q&A function, but a couple of the things that you were talking about. So we were asked, could you provide an example on unclaimed money? Is it the same as a dormant balance? And what is the LSB requirements in relation to unclaimed monies? So what would you say about that?
Okay, so we've got some of the ones. The dormant balance is one that we class as where there's no movement on the file for over 12 months. Some of the money that we're finding the clients now in dormant balances actually relate to property development, and that doesn't necessarily happen within 12 months. So we can actually have a dormant balance, but we can have a valid reason for it. So they are fine to stay there as long as they've got a reason. Where the client can't be found, and therefore the money has to be sent to the Unclaimed Monies Office, and that are the same rules as any other body under the Unclaimed Monies Act. So we have to apply to the law practice has to submit the money as per the Unclaimed Monies Act requirements.
Yeah, so they go to the SRO website, don't you? The State Revenue Office website, and all the details are there. So if examiners, you think that this might be applicable to the law practice you are working with, have a look on the SRO website or with your law practice so that you can tell whether the money should be going or otherwise. There were a couple of other questions. What is the LSB expectation when the bank makes a mistake? What do we, the board, think that the lawyer and the auditor ought to do in those circumstances?
So we have, with the reporting to us, we have the, it's either usually practitioner, the bank. Not only practitioner, we have admin staff come in, and sometimes there's not as much oversight. Sometimes where there's external bookkeepers come in. So we actually can have a few different areas where mistakes can be made in the law practice. So in regard to the bank, we usually get asked, the law practice, to get a letter from the bank or an email from the bank to say the bank have made mistakes. And I have seen some pretty good mistakes that the banks have made over the years. One, $1 million cheque was presented twice, which when I rang the practitioner, he nearly fell off the chair. So, you know, banks can make mistakes like we all can make mistakes. In regard to the mistakes that are made, we'll call them mistakes, we ask when it happened, how much it was, how did the error occur, and what steps are you going to put in place so that it doesn't happen again to the best of your ability. So I think that's that one. I was just saying.
Yeah, there are a couple more coming through. I might answer one of these other ones. We're asked how many of us examiners are there in Victoria? There are about 300, I think, something like that, external examiners registered with the Victorian Legal Services Board, aren't there? It's about that number. Would you agree, Chris? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're just over 300 at the moment, sitting around 300, but I can see we have 219 participants at the moment, so that which is absolutely fantastic. So
yeah. We're also asked the EE checklist that you mentioned. Will that be circulated next week, or how what will happen
there'll
there?
be a link on the website for that, and I'm trying to get it into Excel. Into Excel or Word template to make it easy for you to type in.
But will we? So how will the examiners?
The link.
Yeah, how will the examiners know it's there and use it?
Yeah, okay, well, we'll probably send out a link. This is something new that we actually haven't used. We had used it a few years ago, but we want to make sure it's right actually before we send it out again. And
so we'll probably
it is a great
an
tool.
Email saying it's ready.
Yeah, so we will send an email saying it's ready. And if there's anything else that we can add with some of the questions that if we don't get to answer today, we might be able to bundle that all up together for you. I just saw one, when's the deadline for the Form C? So the Form C is now called the External Examiners Report, and that hasn't changed. It's still the 31st of May. So.
Okay. There's a few more questions. I might continue with what I was going to say. I don't know if Shalene and Christine want to have a look at the questions and see if there's anything we can come back to today. So thanks, Chris. Okay, so the Law Institute of Victoria, a very important organisation and that one we work with very closely. So I can tell you how they fit in. They're another piece of the jigsaw puzzle for regulatory work in Victoria. A couple of years ago, the landscape changed slightly between the board and the Law Institute. And as part of that changed landscape, the Law Institute created 2 consultancy services. And they are for trust accounts and for practice management. I think the next slide may have contact details. Essentially, this is a confidential service which is tailored for the individual needs of the lawyer. And it is something that's delivered by peers or experts, and they are selected based on their own area of skill and practice, their own skill and knowledge in practice management or in trust consulting. So the reason for telling you this is that if you are examining a law practice who you think would benefit from either of these services, please remind them that it is available. So there are the contact details. You can hopefully they will know about them, but if they don't, or you're the one who can see that they might need it, remind them about it. It's important to know that this is for all solicitors in Victoria. You do not have to be an LIV member to use these services. The board fund these services, so it is available for everybody. And I'll just give you an example of when this has been used. So we are actually currently helping a lawyer in Victoria who is suffering quite severe ill health, and he has decided that he will exit the profession because of that. So the practice management consulting group, somebody from that panel has been assigned to him, and they are assisting him to wind up his practice. He has money in his trust account, so the trust consulting group are also assisting him with that. And the idea is that this is a more streamlined way of assisting a law practice overcome a problem. In this case, it's a winding up of a practice. And it means that the board doesn't have to go to the expense and disruption and trauma, actually, of invoking an external intervention. And in any case, those external interventions, we have to pass on the cost to the lawyer. So this is a much more nuanced system that we like to try and use. So that's there for the law practices. Remind them if you think that they would find it useful. Okay, now we have a few more questions. How are we going for time? I think we're all right for time. So if I can invite Christine and Shalene back. If you've had a chance to have a look at the questions, or are there any that we feel we can help with off the cuff today?
Yeah, there's a couple here. Sorry, I've just lost my screen. About recording the issue with the LEAP not recording the register. So should we still report it? I would appreciate if you do, actually, because then I can go back to LEAP and actually say this is happening for a large number of practitioners. That I think would give it a bit of grounds to try and get it resolved.
There was a question about other forms done manually or online. They're all done online through LSB online portal.
And I think, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say the checklist, yes, this is the same as the New South Wales one. So we're a collaborative regulator and we talk to our New South Wales counterparts. So yes.
Yeah, there's only a difference with the statutory deposit account legislation reference. That's the only difference, really. So, yeah.
Thanks, Shalene. Thank you.
So
what else?
Just further on to the question about the manual forms, considering the practitioner does not understand the use of technology. And I was actually speaking to somebody before that I think last year we still had about 27% of people that still had manual records. I'm interested to see how that has changed over the last 12 months. If we do have the odd practitioner that is unable to log, use LSB online, Shalene, if you speak to Shalene about that, if you have concerns about the practitioner in regard to that.
There's a question here about the consulting service. Yes, that is free to the solicitor. So the board funds it through the Public Purpose Fund. So the solicitor doesn't have to pay. And that makes it terrific. And actually, the fellow I was talking about was extremely pleased because it was a relief to him that, you know, he was suffering ill health and this help was available and he didn't have to actually fund it. So yes, that's free.
There's a question where the practitioner does not keep a copy of the statement. We can't verify the account has been complied with. As mentioned earlier, you just need to go by the annual statement that you download through the LSB online portal, and that statement is downloaded by both the law practice or approved clerk, as well as a copy being able to be downloaded by the external examiners. So that's enough verification.
There's a question from Marco. Can you confirm if the final examination are online or manual? So everything's been done through LSB online?
Yes, that's right. It's
not for final. Sorry, that was the question.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Examination.
Sorry, final.
That's a manual one. That's a manual form.
Yes, thanks, Marco.
Yeah. We are still looking at putting that onto automating that. A final examination's a little bit more complicated to put the logic around that because we can have law practices just change banks. So the fact that you just close your bank account doesn't necessarily mean that you're up for a final examination. But that is on our agenda for enhancements as well. Trying to see if there's anything else.
We've got quite a few questions.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of questions.
Yeah,
and
a lot
certainly,
of questions,
as I said earlier, we will answer them. We'll provide some answers when we send out the online link. There's one other thing that I wouldn't mind showing you, and seeing as we just have a few minutes, but Shalene and Christine, if you want to have a look and see if there's any other questions that you're able to answer. But I might just get you to turn off your videos for a moment because Anthony's going to bring up the lawyer enquiry form. So this is something that's new. It's our objective is to provide a better service for lawyers, give them the answers to their questions in as quickly as possible and as fully as possible. And one of the ways we're doing this is through our lawyer enquiry form. So Anthony, if you are going to put that up on the screen, fantastic. So if you go onto the VLSBC website, you can type in lawyer enquiry form, or you can say information for lawyers and go that way. But here is the thing, and you'll see it titled lawyer enquiry form. Down the left-hand side of the page, you will see a lot of articles, and these are called knowledge articles. And the idea is that these are essentially the kind of questions that, or information that is often asked for. So if a lawyer came onto the lawyer enquiry form and wanted to type in a question, and actually, in fact, this is the only way that they can now submit enquiries. So you can go into the system and there's 2 drop-down boxes to fill in. What are you enquiring about? So it might be right down the bottom, statutory deposit account and trust account, for instance. And then the lawyer might say, go to the next section, which is please select. And it may be assistance with the end of year audit. So we've entered that information, and it says that there's information in each of these knowledge articles that you might like to look at. So we'll perhaps go to one, assistance. So sorry, I missed what that one was. If we can just take it back up to the top, assistance with locating contact deals for a lawyer. Okay, so somebody wants to locate a lawyer. This is where the information is. So it will probably send you to another part of our website where that information is held. And that will mean that it's a quick and easy way without having to wait for a response from a staff member. The information's on the website, so we're directing you to it. Another one may be to do with okay, opening and closing a trust account. That's obviously something that the lawyers that you deal with may be interested in if they're changing banks or they're new or they're closing up. And there is a lot of information there which also has links to different forms and so forth that the lawyers will be able to find. So the other thing to say, external examiners, is if this information is there for you as well. So some of the information is directed to you, so you can use this form as well. So you can come in and you can, here's an example of information that's directed to you or about you, but there's also information about, for instance, if things changed because of the COVID restrictions, we would put the information on the website and we would develop it so that would be, you come into the form and you are directed to where the answers are. And that's going to be much quicker and easier for you. And it means that we just update it as we need to. So that's terrific. Thanks, Anthony, for bringing that up in quick time with only a little bit of notice. So can I invite Shalene and Christine back onto the panel? Thanks. Were there other questions here that you were able to answer live?
Yeah, I've just got a couple. Is there any discretion on reporting breaches that for small amounts, e.g. 10 cents? At the moment, we're actually building a new module to receipt and record the trust irregularities. So at this point, technically, yes, they do have to be reported to us. But again, it's what we do with them, the information that is provided to us. So in that case, could be a transposition error, could be anything. So again, that low risk, high risk, that one's certainly a low risk. And the other one, what do we do with dormant balances below $20 that you can't send to unclaimed money? So years ago, you used to be able to add them all up together to add up to $20, and then you could send that on behalf of your law practice, but the State Revenue Office changed that, so you can't do that now. What we do suggest is that if you can't find the client, that you transfer the money back into the office account, and that you keep records that you do that, and that if by chance the client does come back, then you will need to pay them back. So we have quite a few more questions, but we are running a bit short on time. So I think, as we said, we will.
Are there any quick and easy ones that you had, Shalene?
There's just one about, is there a course for a bookkeeper for for a law practice to do. You can inquire at on the Law Institute of Victoria website. They have a specific bookkeepers course that they can attend. So if you just go onto the LIV website.
I think they do them reasonably regularly too, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we do. I mean, thank you so much for submitting questions. It is a little bit difficult to know how to answer them all on, as we're talking now, but we definitely will respond in writing to these. So there's a question about the education and qualifications will be for external examiners and their staff in future. So we are working with the Legal Services Council about there's a course being refreshed, isn't there, Christine?
Yeah, at the moment. So we're working on that now to refresh that course for external examiners. So that should be rolled out within the next few months. At this stage, there's no requirement for existing examiners to resit that course like we had to when we brought out the course a few years ago. So this will just be for new examiners and those that want to resit and sit through the course again. But yeah, the course content really hasn't changed, just the material has been refreshed basically. So.
There's a question here I might answer, which is, what about the case of internet fraud? So we are certainly interested in any kind of fraud or cybercrime that affects trust accounts. Absolutely. If it affects the trust money or the trust account, we need it to be reported. So it should be reported through the lawyer inquiry form, and we will gather the information, we'll take what action we need. I will let you know that the LPLC also have extremely good information about cybercrime, so the lawyer can also get information from there. But if the trust money has been lost because of internet fraud or cybercrime, the very first thing that the lawyer should do is pick up the phone to the bank to see if the money can be recovered. Then they report it to the LPLC or they report it to us and the police, those kind of things. But the very first thing, if you can make that clear to people, is telephone the bank, because the money, you may be able to recover the money. Okay, we're on 3 o'clock now, just on 3 o'clock now. So I might just wind things up there. One of the things I did want to say to everybody, apart from participants, and we're still 213, so thanks for staying with us till the end. I also want to say thank you so much. Last year, it was such a difficult time for the stage 4 lockdown and all that was happening last year, and you examiners managed to proceed through with your examinations. You used your common sense to go out to law practices when you could. When you couldn't, you used your common sense to see what information you needed to receive. So it made the process, it wasn't as full as it normally would be. Obviously there wasn't as much examination and looking through all the records as normal, but the process was really good. So thank you so much for your resilience in going through with that. Okay, I think we're just about finished. There are lots more questions coming in, so I think we'll be busy doing that. And as I say, we'll send out a link to the recording and the slides, and that might be more towards the end of the week or early next week, but look out for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.